Question one is in what ways does your media product use, develop, or challenge forms and conventions of real media products? I think in my product I had a good mix of adhering, developing, and challenging conventions of real media products. The first aspect to address is length. My short film was just under 6 minutes long, which I think suits the genre as well as convention. 6 minutes means it doesn't drag on, but allows enough time to introduce certain themes and meet my ultimate objective of leaving an impact on the audience. Perhaps even a shorter time is the optimum amount, as it leaves the audience unsatisfied and wanting more, especially because the ending is ambiguous as well. This follows the style of the short film Reign of Death, which was roughly 6 minutes long as well, and therefore highlights how I met the conventions of noir short films. Although the brief said the film should be 5 minutes long, mine is closer to 6 minutes. Although this will lose me marks, I made the decision to sacrifice length for a more substantial plot, which had also been significantly reduced in order for the length to benefit the brief. I chose to keep my title brief in order to keep the film as short as possible. Furthermore, upon further research, I found that detective noir films are often brief and minimalistic, and therefore I looked to adhere to this convention in my own movie. I placed my ident at the start and sped it up to reduce the length of the short film, and then had short rolling credits for the actors and director at the end, which is conventional for most short films. There are many conventions of the film noir genre that I chose to meet, develop, and challenge. I looked at the technical conventions of film noir first, which includes editing, lighting, and camera shots. A key factor of film noir is tension. Therefore, in editing, I chose to use a number of long takes, not only giving the audience time to fully appreciate the aesthetics of some shots, but also to build tension. The fact that it restricts the view of surrounding, therefore puts the audience and the protagonist in danger. Color grading also falls under the technical conventions of film noir. In post-production, I changed the color of the whole film to black and white, which is the feature that hooks it to the film noir genre. Also seen in other short films such as Schwarzfader. This was especially integral to my film due to its modern setting, so the black and white allows it to fit into the film noir genre, but also gives me greater room for conventional experimentation. I used the color grader on Final Cut Pro to deepen and reduce the black and white filter in certain scenes. This gave me more control over the lighting and allowed me to create certain themes in certain scenes. For example, in the final scene, I deepened the shadows to a great extent to create a greater sense of impending danger and to show the two-faced side of Brady. Originally, filmmakers would have to do this while shooting, using external manipulation to deepen or weaken shadow. I didn't have the time, skills, or equipment to do this while shooting, so I used available technologies to help me meet conventions. Lighting is also a technical convention in film noir, and arguably its most distinguishable feature. As you can see, I highlighted shadows and used it frequently to convey mood or themes. Seen in this shot where Freeman's shadow looks like it's following him, therefore creating a greater sense of danger and tension. This sort of shot is used in other film noir films, and therefore greater shows how I met the conventions of the genre. I also kept the whole movie in a constant state of night, which I felt really gives it a nice cold, melancholic theme. Purposely started the film in daytime, more specifically dusk. By the end of the first scene, it is deep night, therefore mirroring the way the plot takes a dark twist. This shows how I developed certain conventions, as in many film noir films, although there is a great use of night and darkness, there is usually a mix with daylight. In terms of camera shots, I felt mine were varied and often experimental in their own right. I tried a few different shots to see what effect they'd have, taking inspiration from Orson Welles' unique style of filmmaking. Another technique I used was using low angle to convey the power of Freeman. Another technique Welles employed frequently. One way I didn't meet the genre, though, was my infrequent use of Dutch angles, Venetian blinds, or other defining features of film noir. This was simply because I felt I didn't have the time, equipment, skills, or narrative leeway to include them. I felt they didn't fit the fast-paced plot, but I did practice them first before making that decision, which definitely improved my skills as a filmmaker, and also shows how I did look to meet the conventions to a great extent. There are symbolic conventions of the genre that I look to meet and challenge too. Setting is a component of symbolic conventions, and I adhered to them in the form of a police station, but challenge it to an extent. Police stations or precincts are commonly used in detective thrillers, seen here in S7N. I used this idea and developed it in my short film, as usually the police station is a place of relative safety, However, in my production, it becomes a place of danger, and by setting the scene after hours, it creates a sense of isolation and a lack of protection from the villains inside. Furthermore, to have Brady's betrayal in the police station makes it all the more dramatic and shocking. Other settings in my films, such as the crime scene and the phone box, appear frequently in other film noir and detective movies, therefore showing how I met the conventions of the genre to a great extent. I use a busy, well-populated city as the wider location because we see many hidden areas, many people, therefore many suspects, and it gives a better idea of danger around every corner. This is also seen in movies like Seven or Sin City, or perhaps even detective comics like such as Batman and Gotham. Costume is also part of the symbolic conventions, and I mostly adhere to them. For example, I had the detectives in suits, like in nearly all film noir detective dramas, but I developed this in a sense with the villain, as being in the suit usually distinguishes the cops from the civilians, but in this case it allows him to blend in and therefore heightens his trickery. I also used gloves in the first scene to convey Aston's role and have a greater sense of authenticity. From the written conventions, I tried to keep my script in the style of film noir, but obviously had to have it a bit more contemporary and relevant to modern institutions. For example, in the narrative, the police corruption is an integral part of the storyline, which is also seen in other films such as Touch or Eval, therefore showing that my narrative adheres to convention. One way I challenge the narrative is by excluding the femme fatale, woman in the movie who is often seductive and uses her looks and sex appeal to have control over men. I excluded this as I find in modern society it doesn't really accurately reflect the role of women, as it seems to pass them off as more of an object than an actual source of intelligence. But this viewpoint was obviously different in the era of film noir and therefore contrasts with modern day society. Lastly, there are also audio conventions of the genre that I look to adhere to and challenge as well. In terms of a soundtrack, I actually found I wasn't able to use a soundtrack that is similar to classic noir films like Citizen Kane or maybe even video games like LA Noire. This was mainly because it was very difficult to find an effective soundtrack that was royalty free and suited my film to a great extent. Therefore, I challenged this convention completely and chose to have a darker, more thriller-based soundtrack created using the application Filmstro. This idea is sort of seen in movies like Seven rather than old school scores that are more fitting to the genre.